Welcome back to 8158 Stories of Sacrifice. Today's guest traded cartoon dreams for criminal justice and ended up changing the face of law enforcement. Forensic artist Michael Streed, known as the Sketch Cop, has spent the last 45 years turning trauma into truth, using nothing but a pencil and the power of memory. From cold cases to serial killers, from Orange County to Ghana, Michael's sketches have helped solve crimes, bring closure, and capture the faces that haunt survivors. He's worked some of the most high profile cases in history, including the Samantha Runyon abduction, the Alcatraz escape, and a Louisiana serial killer. And he's still at it 17 years after retirement. But behind the badge and the sketch pad is a story of loss, legacy, and relentless purpose. Michael opens up about life as a cop's son, the grief of losing his wife, and what it's like to raise sons who followed in his footsteps, one in the sheriff's department, the other in the U.S. Army. This one's powerful, raw, and unforgettable. So let's get into it.
You're listening to 8158 Stories of Sacrifice, where we honor the bravery of the first responders and the families who stand behind them. Real people, real stories, real heroes. This is 8158. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of 8158 Stories of Sacrifice. Today's guest, we have Michael Streed. He is a forensic sketch artist, and he has quite a few years of law enforcement experience. So hopefully you get a good take on what he does. He's a fantastic person. Hopefully you enjoy his personal experiences. How's it going, Michael?
It's going great. Great.
Awesome. So I want to kind of get into your introduction here. And you have been a sketch artist, sketching faces and catching criminals for what, 45 years now?
Yeah. So yeah, it's been 45 years now, and there's not a day that is the same as the next, and that's the great thing about this job. Like police work, you never know what's going to happen. And where it used to be, I was driven by a radio and a dispatcher. Now it's pretty much when my phone rings or I open up my emails in the morning. That pretty much drives my career these days.
Okay. So take us back to the very beginning. What sparked your journey from wanting to work for Disney to chasing down justice with a pencil?
Oh, okay. Well, it's really kind of interesting because, and you probably experienced it yourself. You're growing up, and there's certain things you like, and as you evolve and get older, you decide that those aren't the things for you anymore. And it was the same with me. I grew up in Orange, was raised in Orange, right on the border of Disneyland, and I had always drawn since I was a kid, and I just thought it'd be kind of cool to make cartoons and make people laugh and make people happy. And of course, my father was a police officer, so there were always police officers hanging around the house. And one thing I noticed about police officers early on is they're the best storytellers. I mean, they tell great stories. Sometimes it's embellished a little bit, but for the most part, when I heard about the great things that they were doing and how excited they were about their job, how truly passionate they were about it, I thought, maybe I should start thinking of what's considered to be a grown-up job. I mean, I didn't back then, being an artist wasn't in vogue, so to speak. And certainly I didn't know anything about the path of being a Disney artist. It just sounded really good. But I had to face life, and I had to make a living. And I thought going to police work, driving around in someone else's car, someone else's gas, being the first one there and a lot of action, that was a great way to go. So I put my art aspirations on hold.
Okay. So now you mentioned your dad was a police officer, and you became one at the age of 20. What was it like growing up in that environment, and how did that shape your way that you approached law enforcement?
Well, I can tell you internally within the family, it was great. Growing up with a father who was a cop. I mean, he was my hero. I mean, I never forget when he rode his motorcycle down the halls of Handy Elementary School for a show and tell. I was so proud of him that the Harley Davidson roaring down the hallway. It's like, oh, that's my dad, you know. So that wasn't a problem. Externally, it was a problem because I was growing up during the 60s, and, you know, everyone, you know, they called, you know, cops pigs and all sorts of other derogatory names. And so when I went to school, it was no secret. Back then, it didn't matter. You could put police stickers on your car. Nobody bothered you. You could live in the city you patrolled and policed in. It wasn't a problem. But if you had kids and your children went to school where you, especially where you policed, and they found out, and, you know, you got called narc, you know, you snitch, and you really took a lot of, you know, a lot of garbage, you know, socially from other people, and not so much the people that were good students and good kids and not doing stuff wrong. It was the people on the fringe. And
Right.
so, yeah, and that's another story in terms of all the people that bullied me in high school and junior high that I wound up, because I policed in the city I grew up in. I had a chance to arrest every last one of them and give them a ride to the county jail. So that was fun.
How did that make you feel?
You know, it kind of made me, well, I don't, you know, it's kind of sad because I knew one guy who didn't bother me, but I had no choice but to arrest him, and all he'd do was beg and cry all the way to jail, and all driving out of the jail, all I heard was him screaming and hollering. You know, going back to the previous question, you know, my father made it pretty easy in terms of, you know, growing up as a police officer's son. The number one rule was he didn't want to hear about us having any sort of contact with the police, period. They pretty much, you know, told us what the expectations were and the rules were. They weren't helicopter parents by any means. And I lived up to his expectation because, you know, we were too busy having fun playing. Back then, there wasn't the social pressures, there wasn't cell phones, there wasn't, you know, all the social pressures that kids have. I don't even know how they can focus in school all day long because there are so many things happening. I mean, just before this call, just before, you know, jumping on here with you, I was interviewing a young gal from in Baltimore that was sexually assaulted, and she was telling me about her high school, and it's a girls' high school, all girls. And she said, other than the fights that break out constantly, it's a pretty good deal. And I said, what are they fighting about? And she couldn't tell me. They just fight all the time. So, you know, growing up in a cop's family was easy. Stay out of trouble, and it just seems like there's trouble everywhere, unfortunately, today.
Yeah, social media definitely. I mean, it has its good in it, but yet, in the hands of children, it's not very good.
Well, the thing is I think the problem is, and this is just certainly my personal opinion, is that, you know, you have a lot of parents on social media as well, and I don't know that everyone has their priorities in the right place because everyone's trying to be a social media star. I have a social media presence due to my business and my public profile, but excuse me, I'm not trying to compete with my kids or anybody else. I'm not trying to become famous. I'm just trying to share what I do. And so for me, you know, social media is a tool rather than something that's a lifestyle. So it certainly can be a distraction. That's for sure.
Absolutely. It definitely is a distraction.
But it's been great for police departments, though, because the thing is, you know, police departments are very savvy social media wise now. And so a lot of the sketches I do and the images I create for law enforcement, they wind up on social law enforcement social media pages. So in terms of its contribution to society overall, it's been a tremendous tool in terms of keeping communities safe, alerting communities, engaging communities with law enforcement and such. And of course, again, for me, being able to showcase my work and what I do on behalf of communities worldwide.
Right. Now, talking about your work, you know, they say that most people think sketch artists are just good drawing, but your job goes way beyond that. Can you walk us through what really goes into creating a composite sketch?
Sure. Yeah, it's really part art and part science. And I can't tell you, you know, what part is, you know, the weight of each because it kind of fluctuates depending upon. But, you know, people really get hung up on the art part of it. And I think there's a value in being able to grow in your profession, regardless of what you do. And in this profession, it seems to be unfairly judged in terms of the quality of the end product. In other words, how pretty a drawing it is. Oftentimes you'll see these memes on social media, the 10 worst police drawings that these newscasters are making fun of. And I can understand why, they're poking fun at it, because sometimes the image is very rudimentary. But it took something special to get that information, whether it's translated quality-wise and otherwise, to get that. And that means that you have to be a strong people person. You have to like people and have strong communication skills, because you're taking someone who probably witnessed the worst thing that they will ever witness, either someone being murdered, them being severely wounded themselves, or being the victim of a sexual assault. And so that's where the real art is the art of communication. When people ask me, what do I can draw. I said, well, that's fine. That's great. You can draw. I want to be like you. I want to be a sketch artist. I said, okay, but how do you feel about people? And sometimes I've had people say, well, I don't really like talking to people. I said, okay, well, there's still a place for you, because you can do facial reconstructions, age progressions, other types of facial imaging for police. But, the really true heart of a successful sketch is that connection that the sketch artist is able to make quickly with the eyewitness or the victim of the crime.
Okay. So it's kind of like a part sketch, part interview type of event from a witness that has witnessed a traumatic event or something. So you're basically interviewing the person on who the suspect may be.
Pretty much. So what happens is I tell them, I said, look, I used to be a detective, but this is not going to be like a standard police interview. It's going to be an interview where pretty much we turn it over to you. You were the one that experienced the event, so I want you to tell me as much as you can. So there's three phases. There's the introduction, when I first meet the eyewitness. Then there's the rapport building stage, which is the most important stage of any relationship you'll establish, whether it's dating, or whether it's interviewing for a job or onboarding new employees. Getting to know them and what they like, and what really gets them up in the morning, gets them energized. And once you build that bridge and they start trusting you and they sense that they like you and you like them and such, then they'll start opening up. Sometimes you can see people come in really tense, and the more you talk and the more relaxed, you can kind of see the air go out of them. And I just really simply weave the questions and, talking about the crime and what happened and what they saw and what they remember. And a couple hours later, we've got this sketch, and they said, oh, how do we do that? And I said, we just talked. We had a conversation. And I hate to oversimplify it, but it really boils down to, we're just talking. They're talking. I'm drawing. I'm, taking them back, bringing them into the present. Just keeping the conversation, kind of mixing it up to where, they remain engaged. Because if you lose them somehow, you don't get your sketch.
Right. I can totally see that. Now, you have worked on some pretty iconic cases. Let's talk about the Samantha Runyon case. That sketch played a major role in solving it. Can you share the story behind the moment and what it meant to you personally?
Sure, I'd love to. So in July of 2002, I was working patrol in the city of Orange. I was training a new trainee fresh out of the academy. Great day, weather-wise, otherwise. It was just one of those perfect days to be patrolling. And in Orange County, they have a county-wide communications channel where they broadcast all emergencies. And so every time they broadcast emergency, they give it like 2 or 3 beeps to get your attention. And then they broadcast. And so when they broadcast the kidnapping of this 5-year-old girl, and it was not by a non-custodial parent, it became pretty apparent pretty quick that it was a stranger abduction, that it was probably the worst abduction you can have. Kids who are kidnapped during by a non-custodial parent, they're not always in danger, but when it's a stranger abduction, statistics are such that within the first 48 hours, the first 24 hours, I'm not quite sure what the studies say these days, but they're sexually assaulted and murdered rather quickly. So time is of the essence. And in this case, she was abducted in the mid to late afternoon. I was called a couple hours later by some sheriff's investigators I'd worked for in the past on other cases, and they said, just get ready, we might need you. So ultimately they called me at midnight, and at the time it was I loved my job. I was I hadn't been promoted as a sergeant yet, and but I had a lot of personal things going on. I shouldn't say a lot, but I mean, I had a son that was getting ready to graduate from high school. I had another one that just went off to the war in Iraq, and my wife then had just been diagnosed with terminal breast cancer. I didn't know it was going to be terminal then, but it was pretty serious breast cancer. And so I had a lot of things going on, and then I get this call, and I remember, just kind of, driving down Catella Avenue past Disneyland about just after midnight, and all the lights and stuff, and tourists walking around still late. I'm thinking, these were joyful times in my previous family, going to Disneyland, hanging out, and I just tried to use that to kind of push everything out and just kind of get relaxed, because this was going to be a big deal. I mean, at the time, I was made aware that pretty much the case at that time hinged on my sketch and working with the eyewitness. And they didn't have any physical evidence at the crime scene to really point them in any sort of direction at all. So once I got to the sheriff's station, it's really kind of eerie, because the station sat off at the end of a short cul-de-sac, and it was by the time I reached that end of Catella Avenue in the city of Stanton, traffic was almost nothing. The sheriff's station was quiet. I expect this big buzz of activity, but the news reporters already gotten their story and already left, and so it was just outside looked peaceful and calm. You go inside the station, there's like 20, 30 investigators. Everyone's running around trying to keep from bumping into each other, and just a very frenetic pace, because they had to find this gal because of the seriousness of the crime. So they introduced me to my eyewitness, who turned out to be her 5-year-old playmate. And so I sat down with her. Very smart girl, very, very intelligent girl, 5-year-old, very, very observant. But she was very, very quiet. And we talked, and I sat down, and at the time, the sheriff's station in Stanton was a converted school, so they still had all the small desks and tables and such. So I remember sitting down in a small chair so I could be at eye level with her. Mm-hmm. And so we talked till 3 a.m. and come up with this sketch. And she was wide awake. My head was like bouncing off the desk. It's just a long, long day and long evening. And, but we worked through it and got it. And I got the sketch to the detectives, and they put it out to the public, and the thing just blew up. And 2 different people called in with a name of the person they felt the sketch resembled. They had various interactions with this person, knew him very well. And from there, the sheriffs were able to locate him, detain him, obtain a DNA swab, because by that time, unfortunately, sadly, they found Samantha's body actually close to where I lived at the time. And they were able to isolate that crime scene and they were able to find tire track evidence, bare footprint evidence, shoe print, DNA. And so now they had the DNA. So when they detained this guy, they were able to match his DNA to the DNA at the crime scene, make an arrest. And I mean, that case from start to finish was 5 days. I mean, they ID'd him within the first 48 hours and had him sacked up and in custody and booked in county jail, filed charges within 5 days. It was probably one of the most amazing incidents of, total police cooperation. You had 400 plus people working on the same goal, and that's to bring her home safely. And sadly, we didn't. But there were a lot of dedicated people. The only other case I can think of was the other child abduction murder case I was involved in banning the Anthony Martinez case. In Beaumont and Banning, I keep getting those 2 cities confused because they're right next to each other. But that was another similar case.
Yeah.
But that family lost a young girl in the most brutal, horrible way possible. So really, life, it's all about perspective. It's just all about perspective.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. I remember growing up as a kid, one name sticks out, Polly Class.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was probably about 11 or so when she was abducted. I don't know if they ever found her or not. I know that they had a composite sketch of who might have abducted her. I don't know if they ever really caught the guy or not. I don't know if you know anything about that case.
I do. She was kidnapped in 1993, and can't remember the suspect's name, but they did arrest him, and they did convict him. And these cases, they're just, they're every parent's worst nightmare. And this girl, Polly Kloss, was abducted from her home. This guy went into a home where she felt most safe and abducted her in the middle of the night. And the sketch is pivotal, and that's the thing. Like, look, I'm one piece of the investigative puzzle. I'm not the embarrassing part was the fact that I had news trucks lined up in front of my house for almost a week. I was interviewed by every major news outlet in the area and nationally and such, because at the time they were so fascinated by the fact that I could get enough information from a 5-year-old. How do you do it? How do you interview a 5-year-old?
Right.
But I wasn't the only one that worked in that case. I mean, there were other people who spent hours, days, sleepless. I came in, did the sketch, and while I'm not going to minimize the role that I had, really it was the 5-year-old playmate of hers that really made the difference. I helped facilitate it. But at the end of the day, it was the piece of evidence and the work that her and I did together that allowed the investigators and the forensic scientists and everyone else to do their job.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's most gratifying about it. And I've worked on, oh my goodness, probably several. Like the Samantha Runyon case, she was 5. The Anthony Martinez case, he was 10. America's Most Wanted, the TV program, flew me out to Salt Lake City, Utah, to do a sketch of a 5-year-old girl that was stabbed to death on her front porch in broad daylight. And then I did a sketch in San Bernardino back in the early 90s her name was Laura Bradbury. And at the time they thought she was abducted. That's why I did the sketches. And it turned out it looks like she wandered off from the campground, fell between like a couple big rocks and just died there. And they didn't find her body. And they finally closed out the case as an accidental death, I think, years later. So I've had the unfortunate distinction of working on some of the country's most high profile child abductions, but it comes with the territory. So you don't get to pick your cases, so you just have to do the best you can when you get them.
Yeah, I mean, you hope for the best, but unfortunately, more often than not, you get the worst.
Yeah, you just have to, and you have to find a way. Like for me, I try to find a way to compartmentalize. I mean, certainly and when I went to work in Baltimore, I wasn't used to the level of violence. I mean, I'd worked as a sketch artist for LAPD for a number of years. And with that relationship, I drive up to LA and, spend maybe a few minutes talking to detectives, but it wasn't like when I worked in Baltimore and that was my job. I was on site and I visited with them all the time and heard the stories, saw the pictures, and was in the coroner's office a lot because I worked on a lot of unidentifieds and such. But just the stories and the level of violence that people, they didn't necessarily accept it. They just couldn't do anything about it. And it's unfortunate because it's such a beautiful city with great people and a rich history. But it's just, again, it's not the job that people think, where they think there's just some sketch artist sitting in a room drinking coffee, listening to music, burning incense, just drawing placidly and peacefully. I've been in the back of police cars with informants. I've been walked up to the FBI building after 5 o'clock where they let a high profile informant that they didn't want anyone but me to see. I've been in the back of restaurants you can still smell the gun smoke in the air. I mean, I've been strangled by a victim. I had another victim offer to sell me drugs during a session. I mean, it's just not what people think it is. And of course, now that I do everything remotely, I get a little less exposure to that, but I'm glad I experienced what I did. It's been a great career. 45 years, been an awesome career. And I have no intention upon putting my stylus down anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say it's easier with the stylus on technology, or was it better with paper and pencil?
It all depends on who you talk to. For me, the going digital, allowed me to extend my capabilities, allowed me to provide better services, because I do this as a business. I do it full time under my business, SketchCop's Solutions. So I have to provide quick turnaround sometimes. And so the digital tools and, keeping libraries of features and different resources and such allows me to turn out a better product quicker. And what people don't realize that facial imaging, forensic facial imaging, the sketches, the taking a picture of a fugitive and changing their hairstyles and such, I consider it, and a lot of people do consider it, real-time intelligence. Much like human informants giving information to police that they actionable intelligence. A composite sketch of a serial rapist or a serial killer or something is every bit as important actionable intelligence as human intelligence or signals intelligence. And so I try to use, like right now with AI, I use AI in a lot of my work. I use my drawing skills a lot of my work. I combine both of them together. I use whatever tools appropriate to serve the best needs of my client, whether they're in Uganda, they're in Baltimore, LA, or right out here in Riverside County.
Yeah. I imagine, with technology, it helps you out quite a bit, so.
Oh, look, I still miss the sound and the feel of, a ebony graphite pencil scratching across a piece of Xerox paper. And look, when I first started back in 1980, all I had was a number 2 pencil, and I'd go to whenever someone would come in for me to do a sketch, I'd walk by someone's desk and I'd grab a number 2 pencil and sharpen it, and I'd go to the Xerox room and grab a piece of Xerox paper, and I'd sit down with the eyewitness, and away we'd go. And since I learned a lot about interviewing, because back then I was still a street cop and I was still used to the who, what, when, where, why, and how of interviewing, and this is a different type of interviewing. It's totally victim and eyewitness centric. So I'm not doing a lot of talking. I try to encourage them to talk as much as I can. But where I started at to where I'm at now, I'm trying to scale down. My office in some days looks like the bridge of the Starship Enterprise. I got a 50-inch plasma TV on a wall. I just got a bigger monitor, to be able to do my work at my desk. I got Wacom tablets. I've got iPads and iPhones. It's crazy some days. That's our future, though. That's our future. Everything's electronic. Everything's stored in the cloud somewhere. So,
yep. So now moving on, you had worked on some other legendary cases. We're going to talk about the Alcatraz escape. So you helped breathe new life into that case decades later. What did it take to reimagine those escapees, and what was it like to work on something so historic?
Humbling. Every one of these cases I work on, especially because whether they're historical cases or they're serious cases, and let me say, first of all cases are serious. Just because they don't wind up in the news, it doesn't make any difference whether they're cases in the news or not. It's like if you ever watched the show Bosch, where he says, everyone counts or no one counts, and that's true, and that's why I try to approach these cases. But with Alcatraz, I'd heard of Alcatraz. I mean, it happened in 1961. I was 3 years old when it happened. I knew of the movie Escape from Alcatraz with Clint Eastwood. I heard the term the Birdman of Alcatraz, who wound up being Frank Morris, one of the 3 escapees, the other 2 being Clarence and John Anglin. And so I just come back from Baltimore. I just relocated to California, and I got a call from some production company working for the History Channel. And they said, these pictures have surfaced of who we believe to be the escapees, because at the time, the FBI, the marshal's office, everyone that was responsible, federal prison system, they all said, nope, Alcatraz is unescapable. You'll drown or get eaten by sharks before you make it to shore. Now, there was evidence that they made it to shore, but everyone kind of poo-pooed it and didn't consider it to be valid. And so they said, just take a look at this picture and see what you think. And so what I did is I went through a process. Rather than age progressing, because I think somebody did age progression images of what they would look like if they'd survived the swim or survived the raft ride, however they got over to shore, how they would look had they lived, had they made it. I was taking a picture of someone at a much younger age. They told me they presumed that they had made it across, traveled to South America, and was living there under assumed names. And so I looked at the pictures and went through the process of, and I've been trained. I'm trained to do, facial, forensic facial analysis and comparison, and provide reports and such. And so I did what they call a morphological analysis, where I'm comparing, feature to feature, and shape of the face, height of the forehead, shape of the nose, and I did all these overlays of the photos and such. And I actually came to the conclusion that it was my belief that it was highly likely that the two people in the pictures were in fact the prison escapees, John and Clarence Anglin. I mean, nobody knows what happened to Frank Morris, but there's been a lot of talk about the Anglin brothers because these pictures showed up, and they've got a cousin, I think a cousin or nephew, that wrote a book and has a website, and he sends me pictures every so often that surface to determine if what my opinion is on it. So what happened is the production company wanted me to unequivocally say that these were the same pictures, or that these were Frank and Clarence Anglin, John and Clarence Anglin, and that they had survived and they had escaped Alcatraz. I said, I can't do that. I mean, with pictures, the only way you can say highly likely, can't tell, or it's not them. So unless someone jumps out of the photograph and says, yeah, it's me, I'm the guy, or you've got the body, you do DNA analysis and such, I just said it's highly likely. And they said, well, if you were an investigator, what would you say? And I said, I'd round up the posse, which was as close as I was going to say that I think it's them.
Right. I without having positive. Yeah.
Yeah. So that got the retired marshal who worked on the case pretty excited, because he'd been working on the case for decades. And since then, I don't know what they've done. I know the nephew, cousin, the relative of John and Clarence has been working hard on trying to confirm their identity and confirm their location. They'd be in their 90s now, I think, and if they can't find them alive, at least try to find where they're buried and do some sort of exhumation and DNA analysis to determine if, in fact, the body's theirs. Because the federal government still denies they made it off the island. If you look at the evidence that the History Channel presented, it really caused you to think maybe they did.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's possible.
Great case, though. I mean, it's again, I get a chance to do, I get people email me all the time. I've got a picture of Jesse James. I have a picture of Babe Ruth, and I bought it at a flea market, or I got it from a collector, and I think it's him, and I think it's worth a lot of money. Can you tell me? And sometimes I look at them. Sometimes I disappoint them and say, I just don't think it's there. Other times I tell them, I think it's highly likely. You've got a picture of X person, and take it to an auctioneer if that's what you want to do, and hopefully you can get a lot of money for it. Right. But in the process of doing that, I get a chance to do some research and find pictures and read articles and books and things about that particular person, whether it's the Wild West or America in the 1920s and 30s. It's just another fascinating part of my job.
All right. Sounds pretty cool.
Well, and the thing is, that's why I'm going on and on and on. But it's like I'm taking a 45-year career and I pack it down in a short period of time. It's hard to be brief sometimes. It's just I'm just grateful for the path that I took and where it's led me and where it's going to lead me in the future.
Well, there's definitely a wealth of knowledge there, and experience.
A lot. I mean, like I said, I was lucky enough to grow up in a police household. My father retired as a police chief, and he was a traffic specialist. He was a traffic expert, and everyone assumed that when I, became a police officer, I want to jump on a motorcycle and be a motor cop. Mm-hmm. I, rode many bikes and dirt bikes when I was a kid, but it was nothing like that. And I didn't want to endeavor that. I want to be a detective. I want to be a narcotics officer. I want to work homicide, and it just kind of, I became a detective and worked violent crimes and such, and then I saw a sketch in the news one night when I was working for the sheriff's department up in Santa Barbara, and we got ABC News and the TV up there, and I saw this composite sketch that LAPD put out, and I had that epiphany where I'm like, that's it. That's how I blend art in public service. I'll become a sketch artist. So I called LAPD the next day and got a hold of their artist, and he just so happened to be teaching a class downtown LA. Within 6 months of that, I went to the class, and I found an ad in the back of an FBI bulletin, FBI magazine, and wanting people to come to Quantico, their famed academy, to work on a steering committee to put together a forensic art class that Congress had just funded. So I went back there for that, and I learned who the best people were back then. And I got on a plane, got on the phone, and they became mentors and friends. One of my mentors outside of the LAPD artist was head of the FBI graphic artist unit, and he did the sketch of James Earl Ray, who assassinated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He worked on the Reagan assassination, attempted assassination, and I've had all these people early in my career that were really big deals and worked on some of America's most high-profile cases, and they took me under their wing, and they became friends, and not just mentors, but friends as well.
Wow. You definitely made quite connections.
Yeah, and it was, my mentor in LA, I'd lost touch with him for years, and I started looking him up one day a couple of years ago, and I'm like, well, this guy's still alive. I found an email address, and I'm like, I'll just shoot an email off and see if, someone can tell me what happened to him. Yeah, I'll be damned if it wasn't him. I mean, he answered me, my old friend, how have you been? And we got together up in Santa Clarita one day and had lunch, and we emailed back every so often. And unfortunately, my FBI mentor, he passed away, but he was, I was able to talk to him before he passed away. And he said, Baltimore PD got a great sketch artist. I said, I appreciate that. And they invited me to his funeral. I was able to go to West Virginia and attend the funeral. And, but there's no time for rest. Crime takes a break for no one. Here we are.
Right. Well, definitely sorry for your loss. It's never a good thing to lose a friend.
It is not, but I keep thinking when people say it's a tough thing to do, and it is, because whether they're your parents, a friend, a mentor, a loved one, a wife or husband, child, you get to go on. You get to enjoy those breezy, wonderful, nice days. You get to enjoy the taste of fresh fruit and all the cool things in life, and they don't, so. When my first wife passed away, they'd said, "Oh, you poor guy." It's like, yeah, I guess you could say that, but really, the poor person is the poor person that isn't around to experience their children's weddings and other milestones in life and such. And so, I got remarried after a year and helped raise three wonderful children that my new wife brought to the marriage. And I've got a full life in terms of a personal life, in terms of a professional life. So. Yeah, I don't have a lot of time to, worry about things, and when other people have it probably much worse. So,
right. So you also worked on a serial killer case in Louisiana. What challenges came with that investigation, and how did your work contribute to the breakthrough?
You ready for another story? There's always a backstory attached to these things. Okay, so I went to work as a consultant for a company that produced a facial composite software, and so they were working with the TV show America's Most Wanted, and so they were trying to find cases that they could use this software on to try to crack these cases. So America's Most Wanted. Their people called me and said, "Hey, look, we'd like you to go back to Baton Rouge. We're going to film about a serial killer case." And I said, "Okay." I said, "But I want to be there and back in one day." I said, "Because I don't like being away from my family, and I just give me an early flight." And I said, "Dude, you're going to need to spend at least a night because of jet lag." I said, "You let me worry about jet lag. Just get me there and back in one day, and I'll do it." So right. I flew out of Ontario Airport like at 6:00 in the morning. Detective from Baton Rouge, he picks me up and takes me to a small town called Zachary, just outside of Baton Rouge, where they've been having some women disappearing. So, they took me to the police department. I sat down and talked to a newspaper reporter about it. And then the detective took me to these women's houses that disappeared. It was really eerie, just kind of going through these houses, me around these houses where these women once lived, but they were abducted from their homes. One was found murdered dozens of miles away. Another one has never been found. But so then they brought me back to the police department, and I talked to this person, and I think it was like 8 years had passed. Those are always really challenging cases because, memory starts to degrade
Mhm.
just seconds, moments after the crime occurs. So trying to get this person back, trying to recreate the context of the moment where she was attacked. And what had happened is that her and her boyfriend were parked in the back of a car in a cemetery on a rainy night. And it, probably would sound romantic to some people, scary to others, but they were back in the back seat paying attention to each other a little bit too much, and someone left the door unlocked. And so all of a sudden the door opens up and there's some wild-eyed drunken man with a machete taking a swing at him inside the car and trying to carve him up. And so they were able to get out because the attacker was scared off. And so they I don't know that they ever did a sketch of that case, but once they found out it was related, they decided to try out this new software on it. So I interviewed her and come up with this sketch. And at the time they had a task force in like FBI, Baton Rouge PD, a lot of them, because women were disappearing all around the Baton Rouge area and being found murdered.
Mm-hmm.
So they took my sketch to the task force and they were kind of disregarded because they were just some small, police department that wasn't, I guess, the other people didn't respect them probably because they were small, which is kind of interesting because some of the best cops I've met sometimes have been from small places that don't get a lot of crime. But they recognize the sketch as a person who lived in their town at one time, who was a peeping Tom, who was a known peeping Tom, had been arrested before. So they had the name and they gave the name to this task force. It wasn't until after a while that they were able to get this guy's DNA and of course, connect him to several of the murders. So then after everything was done, detective picks me up, takes me to dinner at some, all you can eat buffet, gets me on a plane. I'm home by 9 o'clock that evening, sitting in my recliner watching America's Most Wanted. No jet lag. But I think the biggest takeaway from that is the fact that, even though that the biggest challenge in that case was the time period, the interval between when the crime first occurred and I was able to interview the person. But again, there's things you can do to unlock people's memory and retrieve memory. It's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
May not always be totally accurate, but I think that's the biggest challenge because I'm either the first one called or the last one called. And, I tell people, call me. You don't have to use the sketch. You can have me do the sketch the day after the crime. You can put it in your case file. You can stick it in your drawer, lock it in evidence, whatever. But 6 months later, a year later, 18 months later, it's going to be much more difficult, A, to get the victim to cooperate, and B, to be able to get usable evidence from them in terms of a visual statement like a sketch.
Right.
So,
we will return after this quick ad break.
The William H. Bill Butler Jr. Foundation is on a mission to honor first responders and support those who serve. We provide scholarships for families who have lost a hero in the line of duty, offer second chances to juvenile offenders who are working to rebuild their future, and help new recruits pursuing careers as first responders. Through generous donations and the sale of merchandise, we're building a community that uplifts, empowers, and creates lasting impact. You can be a part of this mission as well. Visit 8158podcast.com to donate or shop today. Together, we can support those who serve, honor those we've lost, and give hope to those who need it most. Behind every badge is a story, and behind every story is a sacrifice. This is the 8158 podcast, where we honor the lives and legacies of first responders and their families. If our mission speaks to your heart, if these stories move you like they move us, join us on Patreon. For just $5 a month, you'll get ad-free listening, exclusive merchandise, behind-the-scenes content, and video episodes only available to our patrons. This isn't just a podcast, it's a movement, and you can be a part of it. Support us at patreon.com/8158podcast. Let's continue to share the stories that deserve to be heard.
Yeah.
Like you said, the memory kind of degrades after a while,
It does, and memory and police memory degrades too, because what happens is you've got this a lot of guys retiring that are aware of sketches and different crime solving techniques, and somehow it doesn't get passed on to the new generation of detectives. And in the case of sketches and eyewitnesses, I think a lot of people just don't trust eyewitnesses as being accurate anymore. And I've got dozens of sketches from eyewitnesses from 5 years of age ranging up into their early 90s and everyone in between that would beg to differ.
Right.
And I get them from all sorts of people too. I mean, when I was in Baltimore, I had people that were, company CEOs, PhD students. I had some little guy come in one time that was an opera singer, a silver-haired grandmother with a leopard floor-length mink coat on that was married, but she was a prostitute on the weekends with her husband's permission. I mean, I've dealt with homeless people. I was locked in an interview room with a murder suspect, and who was going to supposed to give me a sketch. I mean, that's the great thing about this job. I had a woman, I was finishing a sketch in Baltimore one day, and the woman said to me, she said, "Don't you get bored sitting here drawing all day?" I said, "Quite the contrary." I said, "It's the stories that people tell." I always believe that every one of us, you, me, the person next door, has a story to tell. And I think everyone should be polite enough to listen to people's stories, because you'll find out that they're fascinating people. I had a neighbor of mine talking to him one day, talking about flying planes. Come to find out, he was an international airline pilot who flew overseas constantly. He was telling me about all these different airports, the good ones to fly to, the bad ones to fly out of. I never knew, because we never talk like that. And so I tell people, I said, people come through my door, and we talk about their lives. We talk about what they experienced, and they get a chance to share their trauma. They get a chance to share their stories, and there's just that's the part of this job that really, like I say, it amazes me and humbles me. It makes me feel grateful at the same time, is that the people that trust me enough to share their stories with me.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely got to feel rewarding in a way for people to
Absolutely.
trust.
I get phone call. I used to get phone calls from people that I knew, and they say, how'd you feel about these bodies being identified, these skulls that you drew faces on, and hey, did you hear about the serial killer, or the serial killer you sketched getting arrested? And 9 times out of 10, I was so busy working or going on in the next case, I didn't have time to keep track. So I've had a very, very great support group of family and friends, and even to this day, I've been married almost 20 years again, and my wife, has been totally supportive, and always ask about how my sketch went, and how things are going and such. I'll come in my office and look at what I'm doing, whether I'm comparing faces or working on some gnarly looking skull, and unfortunately, the way that most people die these days, and isn't really pretty. But yeah, so it's great. It's a great career. Even if I wasn't a sketch artist, I was just a straight road cop or detective, I still say, what, great career, fascinating stories, fascinating people. It's awesome.
Just from a different perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, my father taught me to respect everybody. He said that, and he was a police chief and was highly regarded nationally and statewide. But he said, not everybody can be a boss. He said, we need good people at the lowest levels, depending on whether they're beat cops, detectives, even the janitor. And he was famous for talking to the janitor. And I can remember talking to the janitor at Baltimore PD, and I used to get stopped on the street by different people, and everyone's got a story to tell, and everyone has an important role in society, an important job. I would never I used to, really interesting. In Baltimore, they have an area called the Block Band, the police station. At one time, it went on for like a mile. It was like this strip of nothing but, topless bars and bars and liquor stores and stuff. So by the time I got there, it'd been condensed down to a couple blocks. And there was tucked in the middle of these bars and these strip clubs, or adult entertainment venues, I should probably better phrase to call them, was a Subway sandwich place. And I used to eat there, and I used to sit in the window, and I used to watch the people get out of the taxis and run in and go to work and such. And I used to see this little skinny guy. He's a homeless guy, and he would wash windows at these clubs and stuff like that. And he'd run between, past the subway to go clean this window at this place and come back. And you could always tell he was so serious, very proud of what he did, very proud of washing windows. And I thought, a lot of people look at him and probably just say, just like another dreg of society. But he was, if you could just see his posture and his just determination, so proud. And I think that, everyone here on earth serves a function.
Yeah.
And we gotta respect that.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Everybody's got a purpose in this world.
For sure.
So you had mentioned earlier that you have traveled to Uganda and Ghana, and also you were talking about Baltimore. What were those experiences like, and how different is forensic art to those environments? And what did you take away from those missions that you were put on?
Well, Uganda, I didn't travel to. I actually did some stuff online for them. There was they had a bombing, a terrorist bombing in a cafe. So I developed a self-guided interview form. And so what I did was I emailed the questionnaire back to the Ugandan police, and they interviewed the eyewitnesses and sent it back to me. And I developed a sketch from that. We went back and forth until the probably maybe two to three times before the eyewitnesses signed off on the sketch. Ghana, I actually did boots on the ground in Ghana. I was invited by a professor there at the University of Cape Coast. He was the head of the forensic science department, and he wanted me to come back there and lecture to their students. And so I did, and it was very interesting. I met people from the Ghana National Police. And one thing I took away from that, for one, they're very hungry for education there. I'd never seen a place with so many schools. Mm-hmm. Great people, respectful people, very kind, very friendly. And so the students are very enthusiastic. They went ahead and I lectured and taught a class on how to develop composite sketches and such. It was something that's very important to the Ghana police, and I'm hoping to do more follow-up here, because it's like a lot of programs, people get really energized, they get it going, and it kind of lapses a little bit, and you have to go in there and prod and, re-energize the programs and such. But they have the same concerns. Everywhere I've been or talked to people, I have associates all over the world, and when you talk to them, you find out that, the police either really support forensic science or they don't. They embrace using police sketches or they don't. Right. But one thing they have a concern about, the universal, and that's living safely and being able to, not become the victims of crime. So my goal is to make sure that, if I'm able to travel, matter of fact, I had a conversation with a potential client over in the Middle East, and because of some certain security protocols, they want me to come over there possibly and deliver the product and train the product to the police over there in the Middle East. So, but my guess is there, like everywhere else, people want to live safely. The police want to acquire technology and tools and training to be able, so they can be successful in that mission. Because people don't feel the police care or losing their job. Aren't interested in doing their job or protecting these people. They start losing trust in the police. So for me, besides being a psychological first aid tool for victims of crime, I'm also a community engagement tool as well. Okay. Getting them involved in the process. So if you again answer the question of what do they all have in common and such, it's the fear of crime, and what are the police going to do about it? So,
right. So now you have developed software and written a book and continue to work post-retirement. What drove you to modernize the field of forensic art? And what do you hope your legacy will be?
Well, I first got involved in the software back in the early 80s when some companies started developing facial composite software. And I didn't necessarily see that they were trying to steal my job or ruin my job as much as I just thought that, okay, this is the way technology is going, and I have no problem. I'm a big fan of capitalism. If someone wants to make money ethically and legally and sell a good product that people need, then I'm all for it. But because of the way they were approaching it, and they didn't really know any better, they were business oriented. They didn't know a lot about what the customer service needs of police departments were and such. I thought, I'm going to get involved in this myself, because if anyone's going to make sure this is done right, I want to be the one driving the car. After I retired, the goal was to, develop my own product. I come to find out that it was a little more expensive than I wanted to endeavor. So I went ahead and licensed some established software, provided my own database, provided my own training, provided my own customer service with their support. And I'm on my third iteration of software, and this one I actually own myself with a partner, of course. And
Nice.
We built it from the ground up. I provided it was almost like sweat equity. He was a computer programmer, a software engineer, and we combined our skills together to build this product. And so it's been well received by police departments and well received by high school and college academic programs. And now we're getting a lot of attention overseas and such. So, we have a standalone app and a cloud-based app subscription service that's more affordable for those that just, don't want to commit. And I'm hoping that, it leads to a legacy through, product development of that product, writing more books and such. That think of, taking what used to be a very traditional way of approaching investigations, like getting a police sketch, to creating a renaissance to where that becomes the first thing they ask for once again, whether it's through integrating AI technology into our current product offering and such. Further training. Again, we have a SketchCop Academy where we're going to be hoisting some classes and launching some classes up there. I get inquiries all the time. People want to be police sketch artists. So we're going to start doing some specialized training and such. So my legacy basically, is one that cared about people and, cared about, making the sacrifices, time away from family, time away from leisure, to make sure that, everyone in every city in the United States and abroad somehow feel safer when they go to bed at night.
So SketchCop is your brand?
SketchCop is my brand. Yep. Yeah, people ask me, like, what do you do for a living? And I tried to explain to them, to sketch artists, and I thought, I need to find something catchy. So I'm like, I'm a cop and I sketch cop. Okay. And so I started SketchCop Solutions, my consulting company, in 2007. And from there, we had the centerpiece of our products was our SketchCop software application. Then along the way, got involved with facial recognition. So we carry, other people's products that I think are quality products are important to both law enforcement and the public at large. So we're, facial recognition suite that also helps identify dead bodies, tattoo identification, scene identification for child pornography and child predator cases that are linked. Skeletal remains, an AI-driven program that helps do skull to face comparisons. So basically, if they find a skull somewhere and they suspect it might be a missing person, you can argue they've got DNA, but DNA is pretty expensive and time-consuming. And so this program acts as a filter where you can take a picture, a 2D picture, and rotate the skull in the same position, do an overlay, and do an examination or conduct an examination, much like the photo to photo of photographs I described earlier, only this time it's skull to face. And then we've got another software we represent that is AI powered that actually cleans up video. So you can do a live feed of like a property somewhere and it looks like there's someone moving some shadows, and that software will take away all the shadows and the darkness and stuff and show you if there's a person creeping around there or not. It'll see through fog. It'll see through glass. I mean, all this stuff. So we do that. Plus we offer case consulting. I've been doing some cold case work lately, updating sketches from 40 years ago and just, runaways. They want me to change hair colors and things like that and hairstyles and such. So it's just a potpourri of anything involving facial identification in a forensic setting. My consulting company does. Then of course there's the fun stuff too. Like doing this, for the last several years, I've been doing the composite sketches for the Bosch TV show. And I got to appear in a non-speaking roles myself in season 2 of The Lincoln Lawyer on Netflix. So my job is never the same from one day to the next, 1 month, 1 year to the next. And sometimes great opportunities, I have no idea, what's coming in the middle of the night in the email or what phone call is going to come the next day. So it's a ton of fun. But again, at the end of the day, this is the thing for me. It's when we talked about social media early, everyone, you almost have to have it these days. And, and so some people who are seeking fame, and that's fine, and they are the product, at some point in time, we're all going to die. And then the product just disappears if you're the product. But for me, I've got something actually tangible people can put their hands on that's going to last long past the time I'm gone, either through death or disinterest, or, I decide to finally retire, which that's not likely, but, so that's the goal I work towards. I may not make as many TV appearances as some or be in the news as much as some, but I'm still working behind the scenes, getting the job done. I'm the person that you never see. You see my work, but you don't necessarily see me, and you know what? That's okay.
Yeah.
The work's more interesting than I.
Yeah, the work is very important.
It is. It is. But again, there's other people out there. I mean, I was really fascinated. You go into a crime lab, especially if you're a detective or a police officer, and most police know that they've got a crime lab or they have access to a crime lab. But the technological developments that are being made are so fast that the crime lab of 10 years ago is not the crime lab of today.
Right.
So.
Yeah, things have definitely changed, I imagine, over the years.
Well, the thing is that, again, there are some people that choose to use a pencil, a crayon, however, whatever their favorite art medium is. And some people say, I just don't, I don't want to do this digitally. I'm an artist. And, and that's fine. There's no requirement that you do it digitally. But I think, like, for example, I tell people, and I've done sketches with my own software before, where I take the pieces, I put it together within the SketchCop's software app, and then I put it in Photoshop, or I put it in Corel Painter or Procreate on my iPad, and I start doing some other art stuff with it, and it just makes it just jump off the page. And it really, there's a lot of people that out there, that detectives and police, that say, I don't know how to draw, but I want to contribute somehow. I want to be able to make faces. And I said the software app is perfect for that. In the hands of a trained artist, extremely powerful. In the hands of a non-artist who's a great communicator, equally as powerful. So I just tell people, it's not a requirement you know how to draw. I can sell you, I can rent you the software, you subscribe to it, I can train you how to use it. And what you do, how much you learn, how much you get into it is up to you. But yeah, it's something tangible that's out there, and it's something that's changed a lot. It's changing the way that police make faces, and much like the technical progress of DNA.
Right.
And I want SketchCop to lead the way, the entire way, in terms of forensic facial imaging.
Sounds like it might.
I hope so. It's yeah. Well, the funny thing is that, most people, they tell me that, again, they approach it from an art standpoint. They're an artist, and I'm not only an artist, but I'm a business person as well. I'm a consultant. I'm a lot of things. And so there are some days I don't even put stylus to screen or pencil to paper. I'm busy invoicing. I'm busy with lawyers. I'm busy with, marketing, so there's a lot of stuff that I do that sometimes, I have to have designated studio days, of course, unless I get an email or phone call that somebody needs something immediately. So it's certainly not for the faint of heart. I mean, at one point in time, if you really get into it, I wind up having like a entertainment lawyer, a corporate lawyer, intellectual property lawyer. I had like 3 or 4 different. I had to finally condense them down into one lawyer that did it all. Mm-hmm. But I've always said in for a penny, in for a pound. So if you're really going to be serious about it, you got to do it right, because there's a lot at stake. So
absolutely. Since you've been working in law enforcement for so long, and all the traumas that go hand in hand with the field, what has helped you stay grounded through the years of working face to face with all of these tragedies?
Being asked to take out the garbage at home. It's just, it's really kind of funny, because when I interviewed for the job in Baltimore, one of the panelists, they said, "What do you do to handle your stress?" I said, "What stress?" I've been very, very, very good about being able to compartmentalize. I walk a lot. I stay active a lot. I realize that, I think that there's, my way of dealing with stress is such that I try to move on from, like, because maybe because it's the nature of my job, and that, there's always another case waiting, and maybe because I'm not so exposed to. It used to be I'd go to the morgue and stand over a body and sketch a face, or I'd be involved as a police officer, and I'm standing there, next to a person who's been stabbed 25 times, sitting there dead in the car, waiting for the coroner to get there. They're just looking over at him and stuff like that. I don't do that anymore, so it lessens the stress. I mean, so I think the biggest stress now is just making sure I get the job done in a timely manner, and I'm able to, still have that support at home. And I still do things like, regular chores. I mean, I remember somebody telling me one time, they said, "Oh, I saw you on the front page of the paper." I said, "That's nice." I said, "Someone else's picture is going to be there tomorrow." I try not to take myself too seriously. Mm-hmm. I've done a lot of really great things, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of people out there doing great things, and there'll be great people doing great things tomorrow. So I try to, do regular activities and regular things just to kind of, keep me humble. And the stress, I've just never processed stress or dealt with stress, and maybe someday it'll all hit me. I doubt it, but it's not a matter of being a cold person. It's just a matter of just, again, perspective. I'm real big on perspective, so maybe that helps me. So, but stress has never been a thing for me.
Right. Especially now that it's all technological now. So
yeah, you're getting pictures of people saying, I get a photograph of an unidentified deceased person that's got a lot of facial trauma and maggots crawling over their face, and it's not the same looking at it. It's still not pleasant to look at, but it's not like standing over in the smells and the, it's like when you watch TV, you watch like a YouTube video of like where you see the police are walking into a house and it's just disheveled and there's dog mess all over the place and the sinks are overflowing. You go like, "Oh, that's horrible." It's like, well, try being the person walking in there. I mean, if they had like smell-o-vision where you could smell it through the TV and
right.
the noises and stuff like that, yeah, it looks bad, but it's worse when you have to deal with it. So maybe that's part of it now, is I look and go, it's a photograph. I don't have all the external stuff that goes with it that causes those unpleasant feelings and such.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's tough. I mean, there are I'm not a big fan of rats. I'm not a big, and so I remember some Baltimore cops telling me that, downtown on night shift, they used to see these rats running around like the size of cats.
Mm.
Excuse me. And that just wasn't I was like, no, I wouldn't want to work in a patrol situation. Like just creeping through buildings, worrying about some big giant rats scurrying past me. You know, it was bad enough like searching warehouses and stuff to really clean, worried about some person with a gun popping out, not having to worry about, you know, tripping over garbage or rats or things. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, especially ones that are as big as cats.
Yeah, and people are not necessarily always good housekeepers as well. I mean, I've been in people's homes that, you know, you think their home looks all together. They have a position of power, position of responsibility in the community. You go into their house and the place is a mess. It smells, it's this, it's that. It just, you know, it's like a crime scene, you know. So, but yeah, I'm just glad, like I said, I get pictures. I don't get the full experience anymore, so that's fine. That's okay.
Right.
I mean, how many years that do you need to get, you know, how many murders do you need to see? How many bad things you need to see before you're, quote, experienced enough?
Right.
You know, so.
I hear that. So what advice would you give a young person, maybe someone who dreams of becoming a forensic artist, or somebody that's working in law enforcement but doesn't know how or where to start? What kind of advice would you give them?
I would say that your best opportunity, if you want to pursue career in forensic art, and let me preface that with, it used to be that most of the big police departments in the United States had a full-time forensic artist. They were difficult jobs to get. The FBI still has forensic artists, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Miami-Dade's just retired. I'm not sure if they replaced her or not. But they're dwindling fast because of, you know, police budget cuts and spending priorities. You know, so a lot of them are going to computer software or you know, they're hiring freelance artists and such. So I always tell people, look, you know, get any kind of job at a police department, secretary, evidence technician, police officer, whatever. Do that job well. Introduce the detectives, make those relationships, introduce them to your art slowly, you know, get training by an experienced person who knows what they're doing, has got some sort of experience, and that will be glad to mentor you and such. And enjoy a happy life as a law enforcement professional and as a secondary duty as a sketch artist. Or people who don't want to go to a police department. Some of the best sketch artists in the world were freelance artists who were not employed by a police department. You know, they had an art business. They were like designers, and they just wanted to help their communities, and just got forensic art training, and let their local police department know about them, and entered into a contract or per diem with them, and it kind of went from there. So but you know, if you want to be gainfully employed and get a lot of work as a sketch artist, then certainly getting a job at a police department, sheriff's department, any law enforcement agencies, probably your best portal, your best entry portal to becoming a forensic sketch artist.
Okay. One last question we have before we get off of here. When you think back on your career, is there any single case, sketch, or a moment that still lingers in your heart or in your mind?
I think the kid cases are always the toughest ones, and it's really, it's really difficult for me because, when you talk about them still 20 years after the fact, people have a tendency to say, well, do you really care? Or are you just trying to exploit and promote yourself, through talking about or writing about those cases? And really, that's not it. That's not it at all. I mean, for me, I think with the Anthony Martinez case, that case went cold for 8 years. And I had back then when you carried those big fat day planners and such, I remember carrying a photograph of the composite with me every day until they caught the guy. And it just, for me, it was a reminder of the horrors that are out there in, protecting my own children and why I do what I do. And I think it's important that people understand and know these. I'm in the process right now of rewriting. I put a book out, SketchCop, Drawing a Line Against Crime, and I took back the rights to the book, and I'm redoing the cover. I'm updating the information, and I'm putting the victims' names at the top of each chapter, because most people's cases don't get written about, and I think that for me, every case is important, and every case somehow stays with me, because each one I learn that much more about people, about myself, and but I'd say that the kids are the kids are the ones that and they're tough, and a lot of people look. I when I was with Baltimore, and even now as a freelancer, I have some periods where I do more sketches in a week than some people will do in their career as a freelance sketch artist. And it's certainly, you only have to, you don't have to do 10, 25 sketches a week to be a good sketch artist. You just have to be ready to go when they call you for that one case. So sadly, I get those experiences because of where I'm located in Southern California, because a lot of those horrible cases happen here, to where, and then of course, me being, people knowing how to access me and request me for cases. So I wind up getting those child abductions and those serial killers and all those people that just do just unimaginable things to people. So, but again, you learn how to deal with them, and instead of making it something stressful, I try to turn it into a learning experience. Every one of my sketches, if they catch somebody, whether they look like the person or not, I try to find a way to learn from that. It's like I can't tell a sketch story oftentimes without talking about the backstory, because in the backstory is where the learning experience is. It's like a street cop that just manages to just miss getting shot or getting stabbed or getting taken out by a drunk driver. You ask yourself afterwards, like, what did I do to contribute to my near demise? And in my case with sketches, like, okay, what did I do to contribute to maybe a loss in information that resulted in it taking longer to get this person caught, or how can I be a better communicator in the future and such. So for me, it's all about learning. It's all about getting better. It's holding myself accountable for the work that I do, and it's the sacrifice that comes in with my job. And anybody who aspires, whether you're a sketch artist, a police officer, an accountant, if you want to be one of the best at what you do, it requires sacrifice. Time away from your family, time away from your kids, missing a baseball game, missing a football game, missing a school event. And I spent a lot of time on the phone, writing letters back in the day, flying all over the country, leaving the country and such, just so I could get to where I'm at today. And in the end, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Was it worth it? And absolutely, I wouldn't change a thing. Wouldn't change a thing. And I'm grateful for this opportunity. I appreciate you having me today. It was just awesome. We've got our own backstory. So right. So it was really a great opportunity to share with you and talk with you and get to know you guys better and such. So I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's definitely been an honor having you on here. This is definitely some really interesting stuff for me, learning about this kind of stuff. And, especially for Brianne, she likes cold case stuff, and she's really big into that. So it's been an honor. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day and your schedule to, be on here with us and to kind of tell your story and, talk with us. So
I'm grateful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So one more thing. You said you had a book that was SketchCop something.
Yeah, it's not out yet. I'm in the process of finishing it up, but
okay.
Maybe I can get it to you guys later, someday when it does come out. But yeah, it's I wrote a textbook, and I wrote a anthology basically of my most prominent cases, and so you learn a lot every time you write a book, and again, you learn a lot about the publishers, you learn a lot about your writing style. It got really good ratings on Amazon, and I learned what I wanted to do. Like, for example, you have to decide, is it a true crime story? Is it a biography? Is it an anthology? And so I think this time we're going to posture it as an anthology, especially for true crime people that just want to read true crime stories.
Mhm.
I just, so I'm repackaging it from the ground up. And like when I published the first one, they wouldn't let me do my own audio. And it was really weird. It was like, I had a executive producer of development from one of the major studios that did true crime shows, and we were talking about a pitch I was doing and for a show, and she said, "You've got a really great voice." I said, "Oh, thank you. Everyone's always told me got a great voice, great phone voice, great microphone voice, whatever." So I want to do my own audiobook, and they wouldn't let me. And so eventually, I just took the rights of the book back. I'm like, you know what? I didn't get a chance to design the cover and work with the designer closely. So I went out and hired a designer and got new pictures, redoing the preface, just everything from the ground up. And then I'm going to record my own audiobook this time, because I don't know that anyone can tell the story as well as the author. And not everyone's got, a voice for radio, but, at the same time, at least, let them have a shot at it. It's their book. And again, these stories I'm sharing with you, I'm the only one that can tell them and give them the life and breathe the life into them that they deserve. So I'm hoping to have that out in the next 6 months. And I wrote a textbook also, and one thing I wrote about, anytime for any of you out there that are writing a book or thinking about writing a book, anything with technology is already past news by the time you publish it, because it changes so fast. So what I did is I'm ripping chapters out of that book, and the software information, now that we own the software, we're replacing that so we can keep it evergreen. And the book really is, how to get into this as a business, how to run it as a business, the types of software and equipment you need to look at, instructional information for our software, and how to use Photoshop and stuff like that. And it's just a starter primer, because you can't put everything in one book. And we'll have that out, and that'll be hopefully a textbook that colleges can use, and trade schools and things like that, in terms of being a forensic facial imaging specialist, and not have that as a singular title, as much as being able to go to a job interview and say, I'm a fingerprint specialist, and I want to be or I want to be a DNA person, but by the way, also I know how to do police sketches and facial reconstructions. So again, trying to create that renaissance and try to create that need for the product, and the need for the relevant job skills to be able to do that.
Exactly.
And the book will help with that.
Yeah, I imagine it's going to help out a lot of people kind of break into the field and maybe bring it back.
Yep, I hope so. That's my goal.
Yeah, we definitely wish you the most success on that. And
thank you.
Definitely looking forward to this book coming out. You'll have to let us know when it does.
I definitely will.
Because I'm sure that I'd like to hear it. I won't be able to read because I usually drive trucks, so I usually have to listen to books on Audible.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the only time I have anything to do.
Yeah, I hear you. No, that's fine.
But Brianne, she could read a book when she's at work, when she has downtime. But it sounds really interesting, and definitely very interested in hearing that. We did interview an officer from Walnut Creek, California, who wrote his own book, and he did his voice on Audible. He was co-author, and his he had a doctor kind of co-author with him as well. Her name was Shauna Springer, and she talked about a lot of what the traumas were and kind of what they meant, and a lot of that stuff. So it was pretty interesting, and it was impactful, like you say, hearing it personally from the individual who's writing the book, from the author.
Yeah.
And not from somebody else, because they don't have the same intimacy or the same emotion attachment to that writing as the actual individual, the author of it. So
pretty much.
I think it's great.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And if anybody wants to, know more, they can reach me, contact at SketchCop.com. I'm on all social medias at Facebook and Instagram at the SketchCop Official. And I'm on Twitter, now X, And then I think my Twitter handle is the SketchCop. And then I'm on LinkedIn as well for those professionals out there that use LinkedIn a lot. It's Michael W. Streed or SketchCop Solutions. So you can reach me there. So I'm all over the place.
All right. Yeah, we'll have to check you out because we're on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. We're not on LinkedIn yet. We were on True Social and Rumble, but we don't really use those because we're not familiar with those. So LinkedIn, we're not familiar with it, but I was thinking about wanting to try to break into that platform as well.
I mean, those people that are on all the different ones. I mean, I don't know how they keep track of it, because I mean, there's different apps you can use to schedule posts across multiple social media networks. But I don't even have the time to do 2 or 3 of them. I usually just post to one and share to the others and such.
Right.
But again, some of my work I only post it if it's in the media. Like if I do something for Baltimore, they put it on their social media page, I share it. But a lot of the work I do never makes the news. It's confidential, so I really can't share certain things, pictures and stuff like that. But I'll post other people's interesting stories. I got a couple news articles that I think are in general terms, in terms of forensic facial imaging and facial composites. I think they're interesting, to those that are so inclined. So there's stuff I can put out. It's just a matter of, again, stepping back from the studio and taking a step back from doing the actual work and talking about it.
Right. Sounds pretty awesome. That's all we have today, and we'll let you get back to your busy schedule. It was definitely an honor and a pleasure to have you on here.
Likewise, anytime.
It was kind of interesting how we made that connection. With you going to school with Brianne's parents.
Yeah.
So that's.
Yeah, I mean, and I grew up just a couple blocks from her dad. I mean, it just, and I remember him as when we were kids and stuff like that. I mean, obviously didn't meet her mom till high school and stuff and such, but yeah, it just, that's really kind of funny. It just shows how the world is smaller and smaller. Right. Every day it gets smaller and smaller. There's so much interconnectivity and such. It's just crazy, but it's also nice too. So I hope they're doing well, and certainly give them my best.
Yeah, they are doing well, and I will let them know that you give them your best regards. And but that's all we have for today, and hopefully we can have you back on here in the future,
anytime,
to talk some more about some of your stuff, and maybe when we get more developed with your book and everything, we could talk about that.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll give you an update as soon as that's to the publisher.
Awesome.
All right.
We really appreciate it, everybody. Michael Streed on 8158 podcast, Stories of Sacrifice. Thank you, Michael, for coming on. We really appreciate that you have taken the time out to do this.
Thank you so much. Talk soon.
We wish you the most success.
Thank you. You too.
All righty. Thank you for joining us on 8158 Stories of Sacrifice. Every story we share is a tribute to the courage and resilience of first responders and their families. If this episode impacted, encouraged, or inspired you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who supports first responders. Follow us on all social media platforms at 8158 Podcast for updates. 8158 Stories of Sacrifice is a team effort. Rico brings the stories to life through casting, writing, original music, and editing. Brianne Shipley as production manager, handling booking, social media, graphics, promotion, marketing, website management, and logo design. Please visit our website at 8158podcast.com. For questions, collaborations, or to share your story, our email address is contactus@8158podcast.com. Until next time, Let's continue to honor the legacies and remember the sacrifices of those who served, every brave man and woman on the front lines, protecting and defending us all. This is Rico signing off and honoring 8158.